Alright, well, the skeletal system, I divided this chapter into. Okay, so bones, each bone is an organ, because remember, an organ is made up of different types of tissues. So bones are made up of bone tissue. Remember, the other name was the osseous tissue. They also have cartilage in them, dense connective tissue, blood, nervous tissue. So yeah, each bone is one organ, and so then all the bones belong to the skeletal system. Bones are alive because they have the cells inside, and the cells still need the nutrients, oxygen, to do the work. Okay, so the bone shapes here, just based on what the bones look like. So the long bones we're seeing here. And so you can add here examples: humerus, femur, your forearm bones, your leg bones. These are all long bones. Short bones are the small bones. These are the wrist and ankle bones. Your patella is also one. Flat bones, scapula, ribs. So when you look at this bone, these bones from the side, you just see them flat. And the irregular bones have just these weird shapes and they have holes in them. Our vertebrae are irregular bones, and also our hip bone is irregular. So now our book goes into the parts of a long bone. So here, epiphyses, it means the ends of the bones. But so what we mean by this is this upper part is an epiphysis, and the bottom part is an epiphysis. And so they label there the proximal versus the distal, but just know epiphyses are the ends. The diaphysis is the entire middle part. There is articular cartilage lining the ends of the bones. So we already learned about that, how that's hyaline cartilage. Then bones have on the outer part a solid layer, and on the inner parts parts with the holes. So what you're actually seeing it here, the outer part here is the compact bone, and the parts and also the compact bone just goes all around. And on the inside, you're seeing here the parts with the holes. Those are that part is the spongy bone. And just know that the trabeculae refers to the spongy bone. So it really means the bony parts making up the spongy bone, but just know trabeculae is spongy. And so on this picture, we're just seeing the bone cut across. And you can see how the compact bone is on the outer layer, spongy bone is on the inner layer. So then we're going to learn that in the spongy bone, we have red bone marrow, which helps to make all kinds of blood cells. Okay, a few more parts on the long bone. Periosteum. This is just the outer covering of the bone, and this is just made up of connective tissue. Medullary cavity. This is the canal that you're seeing going right down the middle. That's the medullary cavity. Medullary cavity, you can see here, it contains yellow marrow. But what we're going to learn is, when we were kids, this yellow marrow used to be red marrow. If it is red marrow makes blood cells. But as we get older, the red marrow turns slowly to yellow marrow. Yellow marrow is just fat. It does not produce any blood cells. Okay, but we're going to go over this on another slide. Endosteum. Endosteum is just the membrane that is on the inner, like the spaces. So it's also just connective tissue. And so here it's talking about the bone marrow red or yellow, can be located in the medullary cavity or in the spongy bone spaces. Alright, so now we're looking more microscopically into bone. And if you remember, when we looked at the microscope slides, we saw these circular shapes. And so now it's labeled here, an osteon are those circular shapes. So just think they look like tree trunks. And you can see here how they go up and down along the length of the bone. In the center of each osteon is this canal called the central canal. And the central canal has the blood vessels and the nerves. They also label here the periosteum. Remember, that's just the outer covering on the bone. You can also see here how the central canals go up and down inside the osteons. But also here, central canals of different osteons connect to each other using perforating canals. Because you can see here, this is one central canal with the blood vessels, nerves, this is another central canal. And so here, the bridge part is it's called the perforating canal. All right, one more thing here. If you notice this bottom picture, this is showing even more close up view of the inside of the bone, and it's showing how there are the osteocytes. And remember, osteocytes are sitting in these kind of like these bubbles or these little houses called the lacuna. But what I wanted to also show here, canaliculus, this means the connections, and these are like, think roads, bridges, connections between the osteocytes. And so this is how the osteocytes can communicate with each other. They can send, nutrients to each other, messages to each other. Okay, so here again, it's just saying osteons. Osteons are found in the bone. And also know that osteons are the structural units of bone, meaning that many of these osteons come together to make up bone. Lamella are the rings that make up the osteons. And so they just go round and round and round like that. So each of those rings, lamella. Perforating canals, we already saw. Perforating canals are between the different central canals, and the blood vessels running through these central canals are providing the nutrients. Mature bone cells are called the osteocytes, so we already learned that. Osteocytes sit inside the lacunae, so those are the bubble shapes. And we saw in the picture the canaliculi are the connections between the bone cells. On your study guide, I asked what fibers are found in bone. Collagen fibers. There are a lot of collagen fibers that give the bone strength, but then also the inorganic salts, meaning calcium, phosphate, the other minerals, give the bone its hardness. Okay, so here we're going to talk about bone growth, bone development, so meaning before we're born, how do our bones come to be? So there are the two different types of bone formation, intramembranous versus endochondral. And these are building different types of bones. Know that for the intramembranous, this is only for the flat bones, how they form. And know that this type of bone formation uses primitive connective tissue. This primitive connective tissue is also called mesenchyme or mesoderm. Endochondral ossification, this forms all the other types of bones, so long bones, irregular bones, short bones, so rest of the skeleton. And know that this type of bone formation is starting out from hyaline cartilage. Okay, so I'm going to put a big star here. Know the ones that I underlined, that I added here. And so then on this next slide, this is showing the intramembranous bone formation. And all it's showing is in the background here, you have that primitive connective tissue. And so what happens is around 8 weeks or so, bone cells start to appear. And so we're going to learn that the young bone cells, the bone cells that make the bone, are called osteoblasts. So they appear, they start laying down the bone, and then the bone gets larger. Okay, so this is just showing that intramembranous bone ossification. And our skull bones are also flat. Spread that there. So along with the scapula, our ribs, they form in this way. So there isn't anything specific on this slide. And then this next slide is showing the endochondral ossification. And so with this one, this starts out from cartilage. And then in the cartilage, bone cells start to appear. So then slowly the bone is growing. What I do want you to know, and you'll see on your study guide, primary ossification center means that the diaphysis forms. So know that those two refer to the same thing. Secondary ossification means that here then the epiphyses form. So what it really means is that the diaphysis forms first. That's why they call it the primary. Then the epiphyses form after the diaphysis forms. Now, until we have stopped growing, finished growing, there's still a little bit of cartilage here. They try to show here, and especially you can see here, a little bit of cartilage. If there is still cartilage in the bone, that's called the epiphyseal plate. and you're seeing it between the epiphysis and the diaphysis. And so the epiphyseal plate, also known as the growth plate, between the epiphysis and diaphysis, and you can see here, when there is still cartilage, we call that the growth plate. This picture just shows how the cartilage turns to bone slowly. So you can see how the cartilage cells, they first get larger, and then they start to calcify and die, and then you have the bone instead. And so turning cartilage into bone, osteoclasts are these other cells in bone. Osteoclasts are able to break down the calcified matrix, but they also, more importantly, break down bone. And so we're going to see why that would be important. Osteoblasts are the builders. Osteoblasts come in and lay down the new bone. And so bone can continue to grow in length as long as there are cartilage cells in the epiphyseal plate. But once growth is finished, all those cartilage cells have turned to bone, then there's no more growth. But bones can thicken. The more you use bones, the stronger they will get. So even though you have finished growing, your bones can get thicker and stronger throughout life.